Good evening. Welcome to State of the Art. I am Federico, your host, and tonight we have the distinct pleasure of having Delamer Ituarte. Delamer Ituarte is a gallerist who represents mostly anonymous artists, and she has the knack of finding beauty and talent within people who would never have the means to do so. Delamer, thank you very much for being here.
Hello, Federico. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Pleased to meet you.
This is amazing.
I would like to start at the very beginning. Where were you born? Where do you come from?
I was born in the Falkland Islands, British colony.
Of course, very near Argentina.
Yes, my father was Argentinian and my mother was British. I don't know about my mother that much.
I can definitely tell your father left so much of an imprint in your life. Can you tell me a bit more about him, please?
Yes, of course. My dad was a very, very cultivated man, a huge connoisseur about art. He never dedicated himself into art, but he loved art and antiques. And he really, really taught me a lot about all this world. There's not really much to see in the Falkland Islands, so everything that I learned from my father was with the books that he told me about, the stories that he told me about, and then until I grew up, I had the opportunity to travel the world. But before that, everything was stories that my dad told me.
And so I'm assuming that it was your father who instilled that passion for art within you.
He did. He was a wonderful man. He passed away when I was 19 years old.
You were very young.
I was very young. I lived with him. He really wanted me to go and study to Paris, so I left to university. I studied sociology and anthropology. I never wanted to study art.
That's very interesting. How come, you being so passionate about art, what drove you away from it in a way? Or what drove you towards sociology?
I was really stuck to the passion and the way my dad taught me about art, that I didn't want anything else to interfere with that. I loved everything that my dad taught me, and I think that he taught me quite a lot. So when I had the opportunity to go to study in Paris, I decided to study something completely different. And something that my dad also taught me is he was a very people person. He always liked helping people. He was an amazing human being. So that's why I decided to study sociology and a master's in anthropology after.
What brings you to Mexico City now?
Well, as you know, I represent an anonymous artist that plants his pieces in different parts of the world, and this time he told me that he was going to do it in Mexico City. So he planned the project, I helped him out, and that's why we're here.
I know you don't like to talk much about your artist. There are even rumors that it's a woman, not necessarily a man, or even a couple. Would you care to elaborate about how you met him, her, or the person?
Well, I think you're true about that. We like to keep that a little bit anonymous. So honestly, we don't know if he's one artist, if he's a man, or it's a woman, or it's a collective, or it's a couple, or it's a group. We have no idea who the anonymous artist that I represent is. Let's just, to make it a little bit simple, let's talk in terms of singularity, okay? Let's pretend it's a man, okay? Just to make it easy. When I had the opportunity to meet him, I was completely surprised how he was not interested in money or fame. I mean, of course, everybody needs money. Everybody needs to survive in this world, but
make a living.
Yes, exactly. He had to make a living, but he really wanted to show what was creation and what was art about. Just throwing your soul out there. I mean, there's a lot of types of art, but what really surprised me about this gallerist was that he truly wanted to show his soul through his pieces. That's the only thing that he was interested in, and to be honest, that's one of the only things that I'm interested as well as a gallerist.
This is not your first time in Mexico, though?
It's not my first time in Mexico.
But it is your first public time, let's say, in which you are working.
It's the first time that I represent this anonymous artist in Mexico City, but it's not my first time in Mexico City.
That's mesmerizing. So we are, of course, in a chapel
Yes,
to Mexican
exactly.
art.
In a chapel.
In a chapel of
Completely.
Mexican modern art.
Yes. Well, this is a very a really Mexican scene. You know, it's painted in a park called Alameda, a really important park in Mexico City. And I think Diego Rivera did an amazing job, as he always did, honestly, capturing the people in the streets, how they lived in that time. I mean, obviously from his perspective, but he touches a lot of different things. You know, he touches from the aristocracy to the people that lives in the street to the all kinds of ages, all kinds of things. And I think in a way, what I do with Delamer Ituarte and the anonymous artists that I represent is that we always do it in the streets, and we capture what's happening in the middle of the street, depending on the city that we do the tour. So I thought that this place was perfect to this interview because of the meaning of this mural.
So your artist, you have made several other works with him in several cities, the most famous of which is the one in New York, in Chelsea. How does this one in Mexico City differ from the one in New York? Or do you think it's still very much attuned with the same?
So yeah, it's very similar in the way that it's made. I think it changes from city to city, the theme, the inspiration of the artist. So I think the pieces in New York have to do more with the familiar bonds that the artist had with, you know, with his family, with his wife. Has to do more with his quotidianity, maybe.
I remember one that was wonderful, of the breasts being closed down for service.
Oh yes,
I
yes, yes,
really
yes.
adored it. So, I mean, the thing is, what I admire, and so many of people in the art world admire about your work and your artist's work, is you are democratizing art with culture for everyone. You are not just leaving it for the elites, since you even stick plates into the work pieces in the street, so anyone can see it, anyone can appreciate it. Not only someone in a museum or in a specialty gallery. So do you think it is crucial, or do you think it important for art to be democratized and not so being within the elites?
I think that that's something that has changed completely and it's going to keep on changing. I don't think art is only for the elites nowadays. I think that there's many artists that concentrate their work in not being for the elites. I mean, my anonymous artist does this, and I can tell you many names of artists that are doing this. So I think that that's a very antique concept, you know?
That's
like I
very
think
true.
art is changing so much.
I mean, it is, you say it is, and let's say, a concept of yesteryear, and yet many a gallerist and many a museum nowadays, unfortunately, still doesn't quite let's say, the general populace in. So I really think it is admirable for you and your artist and your foundation to do this, to share art with everyone and to let everyone have the opportunity to enjoy art.
I mean, I don't think that it's that they can't or they're not allowed to go in, but the proper culture doesn't really support the arts. You know, I think that that's the main problem. It's not that they're all not allowed. I mean, the thing is that people are not educated to put a strong emphasis in art. And I think it's really important because when you start understanding what art is, you start understanding what the world is about, I think. And what I really enjoy about representing this artist is that he is also giving myself and everybody else the opportunity to understand art in a different way. You know, at the end of the day, all his pieces are extremely contemporary. I mean, what I love about this artist as well is that you really can't define it. You know, you can't really define it as urban art. You know, you can't define it as public art. Can you define it as anonymous art? Like, how would you define it? You know, so what I like about this is that everything's really about interpretation. So, and I'm helping people understand the interpretation of the pieces. But honestly, someone can see, for example, Affix to the Coeval Orb, you know, like the first piece that we started this tour. Someone can see what I'm showing and can see something completely different. You know, someone can say, I don't see a plug in there, I just see three things that for me means this. For me, the planet Saturn means something completely different, you know. So everything's about interpretation, and I think that the way that you interpret what you see is a way, yeah, it's your life.
Do you think art is sacred?
I think it has to do more with appreciation, you know, the more liking it or not liking it. So when my dad started showing me about art and started teaching me how to see the world and how to see art, sorry for being so repetitive, I learned how to appreciate, not really to like or not like art, but to understand it. But then I realized as I was growing up that everything that I saw, I liked, everything. And then I was like, wait a minute, I don't need to like everything, because then where do I come in?
Of course,
you know? So I learned to appreciate, but I also reserve that little space for myself, whether I like it or not. That's something different.
So tell me, nowadays, who is the artist you admire the most? A living artist today?
Oh my God, that's a very difficult question, but I could say right now, and maybe because recently I have been studying her, maybe 3 years I wouldn't have answered you this, but I think that a really amazing living artist right now, it's Adrian Piper. I think she's an amazing performance artist, and the things that she investigated and researched with her pieces are amazing.
I saw a documentary on her making some kind of dressing herself up as a man.
Yes, the mythic being. That's amazing. Yes, I mean, I knew her from a long time ago, but I really hadn't had the chance to really invest into her. So right now, I could answer that for me, Adrian Piper is an amazing artist. Yes.
Who is your favorite past artist?
I think Rothko's art spoke to me after being a little girl and realizing that I saw Rothko everywhere. It's not that Rothko spoke to me and then I started seeing him in the street. I think that I started seeing him in the street and then his art talked to me. And I think art in a way is like that. It's in everyday things, everyday lives that just happen out of a spontaneity. And then when we go inside a gallery, an art fair or a museum, that's where we connect. Because I think art is a conscious choice.
Of course.
Art is a conscious, talking about art in the museum, okay? Art is a conscious choice, it's a conscious creation. So when you go out there in the streets, and then you go inside a room, and you see a painting that speaks to you because it strikes something in your memory, that's when the magic happens. That's when like the explosion happens, yes.
Do you find Mexico magical and or surreal?
Yes, Mexico is absolutely magical. I mean, all the world is, but let's concentrate on Mexico. It's absolutely surreal. Absolutely surreal, being in the middle of an amazing, fabulous restaurant, having a meal, and then having this like group of guys playing guitar and saxophone and whatever. I think that's the mariachis. Yes, I think that's absolutely surreal. The contrast that you see in the street. I mean, that's something that can be really sad. But I think that Mexico is in a really important stage because I feel that Mexico is in a shift right now, because now we still see a lot of divisions, but every time we see less, we see less, we see less. Like in this painting, in a way. I mean, Diego Rivera wanted to put everyone inside, but if it was a normal day in the park, I don't know if people would be as mixed, you know? But every day they're coming more together, you know? Every day you see both people from around the world. In Mexico, people from the high class with a lower class having a beautiful interaction, more projects that talks about the general people, more integration. I think that the world has to come to a complete integration. And I think that Mexico is doing quite well. A lot of people have a negative response to this, but I really think that it's the opposite.
I think that's very true, and I think the reason for which you see this coming together of all layers of society is one thing: it's culture. It's the one thing that truly can connect us to our core beings. And I think you and your artists, or whoever he, she, or they are, understand this.
I think that art is, I mean, yes, art defines culture, and in a way also culture defines art, but I think art is starting to be truly more for everyone. You know, as you say, before it was more for the elites, now it's for everybody, and I think that as the years go by, it's going to be more for everyone and more for everyone until art is something that's completely built in everybody, not meaning that they have to be artists or know a lot about art, but they can have like an opinion about it completely, you know. I think that that's gonna happen.
Delamer, thank you very much. It has been a real pleasure. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much, Federico. This was
Enjoy
amazing.
the rest of your trip.
Thank you so much.